Hello! I am here with Academy Award winner Robert Short, and we are going to talk a little bit about a project that's very, very near and dear to my heart, and that is Splash, you can see by Robert's background, and Daryl Hannah peeking over at him. Good job, Daryl. You're doing great.
Good job.
So, let's start at the very beginning. I've heard it's a very good place to start. You made the tail.
It's only a rumor.
It's only a rumor. You made the tail from Splash. You constructed it. I heard that the director had some ideas that kind of
some input into it. Yeah, I was responsible for designing and building the tail, as well as doing all the transformation effects. And all the supervising all the underwater action as far as how the tail was used, and the prosthetic, what I want to refer to as like the backup, or not backup, but the prosthetic tail on a stick, which we use. So we had a little tail on a stick, which was the little young Madison, and then we had a big tail on a stick for doing things like hitting scuba divers over the head with the tail, and doing the kind of movements that obviously Daryl could not do while wearing the tail.
Yeah.
And I've always been very proud of, especially what we did with the transformation sequence. I was responsible for the design and the actual construction, and then overseeing the tail action on set.
I mean, what's really, there's so many exciting things, right, about this film. For me, and I know for a lot of mermaids of my generation, we had Splash and we had Little Mermaid in this, mermaid decade, and I think that's helped this resurgence of mermaid stuff we're seeing now. Looking at that film and watching it recently, which I just did, it holds up. The effects are amazing. They're practical effects. Disney has added some rather unfortunate CGI effects to it if you watch it streaming on Disney Plus, which I don't recommend.
Oh my God, the Disney Plus editions. Those are, let's just say, fascinating at best.
Yeah.
Editions. I recommend. I highly recommend, after you've watched the Disney Plus version, that you drag your old DVD out and take a look at that as well.
The effects hold up. They're still beautiful. I know for the transformation sequence that was going to be a one-shot sequence, right? That was one of the first things we talked about. Yeah. And
we have one cut right in the middle of it because the bathtub itself didn't fill up with enough water that we wanted to during the sequence, so we kind of jumped over. There's one effect that's missing from the sequence, which is she slides her feet into the water and her feet change into flippers. And that effect worked, but we didn't have enough water in the tub by the time her feet hit down there, and so it didn't look right.
Yeah.
So in the end result, we cut it out. And with everything else going on, we only had so much time to complete the shot, set it up, do the actual shot, and then and get it done, which meant we really didn't have a chance to do it over and over again. And so we have this one cut, and the reason why Mitch Suskin, the visual effects supervisor on the show, brought me on specifically because he knew of my water background, the fact that I'd done some underwater work, and that I did creatures. So it was a good fit. And Mitch and I developed the actual transformation sequence, storyboarding it and putting the concept for it together. And basically what I wanted to do is that at the time that Splash was made, there were a lot of transformation sequences being done in werewolf films. And the werewolf transformations were all done in very quick cuts. and very gross, you know, ears sprouting and fingernails sprouting, and then you'd cut to the back of somebody as the bones started changing. Then you'd cut to a nose extending. And it was really popular at the time, these transformation sequences, but they were all very horrific and you could get away with a lot of quick cutting. And the idea was how to get away from the standard of the time and bring something new to it. And that was the idea of doing something that was lyrical and beautiful and just the opposite of what was being done at the time. And so we just kind of gave ourselves the challenge of, well, everybody else does it in quick, small little cuts, you know, we know how to set those up and shoot those, but what's the opposite of that? Okay, we'll do it in one take, and we'll just try and do everything in very lyrical, slow kind of reveals. Mm-hmm. And that was our challenge, was that once we set ourselves on that path, we knew where we were going. And so that led to the idea of let's do everything we can to do it in one shot. Mm-hmm. And so we always thought that it would just be one shot from the time that Daryl sat down on the edge of the bathtub, and then we just do the sequence. But Ron added to that Daryl is in bed with Tom in the bedroom. She gets out. All of a sudden, you know, we had the addition to that sequence where she's in bed. She wakes up, walks down the hall, then gets in the tub, which is a whole, and that's still part of the one take. Yeah. So all of a sudden we went from, oh my God, you know, we went from, okay, well, this is manageable, to, oh my God, what do we, okay, now what do we do? And so you figure out a way to get all the tubes and the vacuum tubing and stuff, you know, that has to be attached to Daryl, you know, all wrapped up and taped to her back and her thighs, and, you know, have her, you know, slip into the bathrobe without seeing any of that stuff. And then the minute she sits down on the edge of the tub and the camera kind of goes down to the hairbrush, everybody runs into the shot and rips all the tape off of her back and unfolds all the hosing and attaches it to all the vacuum pumps and everything else that's going to be needed for the shot. So that added a little more stress, which is why we can only do it like once for the day, once we had everything set up and everything was timed out, because it actually went, you know, the sequence went a lot longer than we had ever even actually planned. You know, I mean, we knew going in on the day how long it was going to be, because you know, we'd all kind of come to terms with it, but that was a little additional thing that Ron added to the overall sequence that just made it a little more challenging, shall we say.
Love
that was the fun of the 80s kind of effects films, where you really had to think on your feet and you had to do a lot of problem solving and you had to shoot your plan, and you didn't have any, you know, there wasn't any, especially without CG to correct anything, there just wasn't any way to do it other than, you know, use magician's tricks, kind of a sleight of hand kind of thing. Let the audience look one way while you're changing out something else and not realizing that, you know, your camera's kind of gone off the main subject for a moment and then come back, and they don't see what's happening behind the screen, or just off frame, which is a dozen people running in screaming, going, no, let me get this, no, I've got that, no, I got it, okay, I've got it attached, have you got it, okay, we're ready to go, okay, camera's coming up, okay, all right, set, we're good. And then everybody's like, ready. But yeah, you never see the madness behind the screen, which you don't have to, which you literally don't have to do today, which certainly makes my life easier when I'm on set coordinating something. So it's a lot easier to do those kind of shots these days, but a little bit of the magic is gone, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. To see how, you go back and you watch some newer fantasy films, even the first Harry Potter, and the CGI just looks atrocious, right? But if you watch Splash, it's still really beautiful, and there is that sense of serenity. I think most folks who love mermaids, when they make themselves a bath, like that is a scene always in, brushing the hair, turning the water on. It doesn't surprise me that the bathtub didn't fill up quickly enough, because that bathtub was so big.
Of course, if we'd had our wits about us, we would have filled up the bathtub beforehand. It was something that we missed.
Yeah, the too many running around.
Too many. You get the cables attached. Kind of thought processes.
So I have a question about the tails on sticks. So a few questions actually around the tails on sticks. The little girl mermaid who appears in the beginning of the film,
Yeah.
she was never in a prosthetic tail, correct?
No, the plan was always to have her dip down and then to have the little puppet tail pop up. We decided that at the very, very beginning because we were going to be shooting on location. Time was an issue. Working with children, you've got a particular hour. You've got particular hours you have to work with them, and the last thing you want to do is try and build something and put a kid in a tail, and then on cue in the actual ocean.
Yeah.
Get them to dip down, do a somersault and flip the tail up exactly on cue when you need it. Not gonna happen.
Yep. It's also a beautiful storytelling decision, right? Because you see this little girl in the ocean with Alan, young Alan, and she's just sort of there and you're wondering what's going on. And then you see she's a mermaid.
Yeah, exactly. And we sculpted a little miniature of the tail. The body of the tail is a custom sculpture specifically for that. But then I just took a casting of the full Daryl tail and just cut it into that little heart shape. So we didn't make a custom fluke for her. That was just Daryl's fluke, just retrimmed to be a little, to be the little soft rounded heart shape.
So the tails on the sticks, do they still exist somewhere? Are they?
Disney Archives probably has the big tail on a stick because they hold on to those things. And Ron Howard still to this day, at least the last time I was over there, still has the little girl tail on a stick in his office.
That's wonderful. That makes me so happy. This little mermaid tail on a stick.
Yeah.
I heard that there's some pretty important Splash memorabilia that was just recently uncovered.
Oh, yeah. I had to recently, because my rental rates on some of my storage warehouse area went up. So they're like storage containers, truck container type things, and so the rental rates went way up. So I had to condense down some of our stuff that's in there. And the very last thing that I found as I was cleaning everything out of this 40-foot trailer, after kind of going about halfway through emptying the trailer out, which was from bottom to top, was like, what happened to the splash tail molds? They don't seem to be here. Did we misplace them? Did they get lost in the shuffle when we were moving studios? I was getting a little worried, but at the literally as we moved out the last crate from the very back, Daryl's original tail mold was at the very back, along with her little pectoral fins and her dorsal fin and the fluke. So we just recently, about 2 months ago, rediscovered the original molds that we made the tail from.
I mean, this is so exciting. It's so exciting.
So yeah, and I think we may have even found some barnacle molds and the little octopus mold we made for for putting on the old sea hag, which.
And so there was another mermaid character who, if folks don't know, who was in the film. And did you actually film her scenes and then she was cut?
Yeah, yeah, we filmed the entire scenes inside the galleon. There's a thing where Madison is looking at the map and figures out Tom's location from his ID, and goes to swim out of the she puts the map away, and then she turns around, and then from above her, dropping into frame from above, is this old sea witch that drops into frame and scares her. and it was actually done as like a jump scare kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then she gives Madison the legend of the mermaids, about how many days she can spend on land before she's permanently banished from the realm of mermaids, and it gives her the time frame of how and why she's got to get back in time. And what happened is that we filmed the whole sequence. The sequence was put in the film, and then the test audiences were like, the comments from the test audience was, why is this scary thing in the middle? Why is this scary thing in the middle of this comedy?
Right, this romantic.
Yeah, it's like, this is, we're actually kind of scared of this thing, because, and it's one of those things where, being a monster maker and creature guy, it's like, make her scarier, make her, make her stranger, make her, so the audience told us what to do, which is, what is one of Ron's big strengths, is he listens to his test audiences and trims what doesn't need to be in a film to make sure that everything is firing on all cylinders, which is why Splash is the way it is.
Yeah.
And he could have kept that sequence in there. But again, it was the wrong tone, and it didn't fit with she had forwarded the story, but in the end result, you didn't really need to know it. You never realize as an audience member that we go, that there's an entire sequence missing. I look at films and TV shows, especially like Sirens, where everything is underwater as far as the tails go, is completely CG, and I really miss the athleticism and the lyricalness of an actual actor wearing a tail and finding a way to make it their own and give it their own particular kind of personality, and the fact that that it's real. Yeah. And I honestly think that people would be better served making the tails and making the adjustments in CG to make them look, to fine-tune fine-tune the rough edges and stuff. But I really miss that tactile feeling of things being real.
Well, when you look at projects like She Creature, which is a smaller horror film, right? They have a very beautiful prosthetic that they use, and I think they had bits and pieces too. I'm not sure if she was ever in a full tail. Right. But that's really beautiful. And even The Shape of Water, that was a practical effect, like that they enhanced, I think, with CG. So it's worth it, I think, to make these things. And the fact that, you just found the splash mold, so maybe there'll be some Madison tales. As part of the
tales in the future somewhere.
For certain mermaids, I don't know. Speaking of lyrical underwater performances, Daryl Hannah is astounding, right? She took this character in so many ways. She's really inquisitive. She's very, very awkward in a very endearing way. She's sort of credited to be one of the manic pixie dream girls, right? Now we've sort of put that we're in this umbrella. But her performance is so captivating, and so much of that was her underwater. And I think the plan originally was not even to have Daryl do the majority of the swimming, right?
Yep, the plan was to have the stunt woman do all of the swimming underwater. And though we made a tail for Daryl, we made two tails for Daryl, we made two tails for the stunt woman. The plan was always to have the stunt woman do all the underwater work and then save the tail work for Daryl for her close-ups, perhaps in a tank or out in the Bahamas, but just do close-up work with that. And that all changed when we were doing a test with the tail, and Daryl had us slip her into her tail so that she could show Ron how well she could swim in the tail. And we were doing a camera test, and she just swam so much better than the stunt woman, who'd been practicing for weeks with the tail, but she still had that kind of, heel in, heel out kind of kick Yeah, exactly. That standard. Yep. And then Daryl being, a big mermaid aficionado and wanting to be, and swim like a mermaid as a little girl, etc. Knew the whole dynamics of how to flow your body into the tail to get the propulsion, and the difference was night and day. And you could see it instantly. And she was like, she went to Ron and said, "You've seen me in the tail. You know that I can swim. I'm swimming better than the stunt woman. Can I do my own, can I do my swimming?" And Ron said, "We'll have the stunt woman on, on standby all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you don't want to do something, or you're tired, or it's beyond what you want to do, she'll be there. But I'm all in. We'll have you do as much of your own swimming as possible." But Daryl had to actually make a case for getting a chance to actually wear the tail in the long shots and in the medium shots, and it's because of Daryl and her wanting to do that. It makes an enormous difference in how the film was shot. Mm-hmm. And how the film feels. I think of the shots of like Kornbluth, in his diving gear, with his camera,
yeah.
Looking around, and Daryl herself, swimming around the corner, and her looking at him and giving him her particular expression, and then flipping around and like, taking off in the tail, and him scrambling for the camera. And I was like, there's no way that there's just no way that you could have shot that without Daryl. And that shot could never have been done without Daryl having said, "Let me do it. Let me do it myself." The Daryl's imprint on the film is monumental.
It's enormous, and I mean her whole arc, the whole flavor of the film, her humor beats are so good too. She has some really excellent comedic moment.
Right down to choosing the name Madison on the Avenue sign, which obviously little girls were never named Madison until then.
Daryl is a vegan or a vegetarian, correct? She's really
right. I don't think I ever saw her eat anything but French fries the entire time that we were on the production.
That's all
I ever saw her eat. Well, her idea of being a vegan was French fries.
That was a challenge, right?
Of course, that brings us over to the lobster, the lobster thing, which she has her own great tales about. And I personally wasn't there on the day that they stuffed the lobster shell with the leeks. And the thing is, Daryl and Tom were both such troopers getting during the show that, they had their boundaries like anybody would, but they tried to push past, their own demons and their own, parameters as much as they could within keeping true to themselves. And I'm sure that even chewing on the outside shell of a lobster, gave Daryl the willies, but which I can't even imagine chewing on the outside shell of a lobster. But
I do have one thing to show you. My little Splash memorabilia here. Grab it. So. This has been one of my dream projects to create.
Oh, right, to create the necklace.
This is the necklace.
Oh, cool. Hey, complete with the seahorses on the side. And the coins.
The coins.
Yep. And the lion.
And she has all these bangles in the back too. And it's been so nice to have a Splash DVD now that I can stop and really study and
study the pieces. Well, that looks great on you.
Thank you. It would look even better if I had
a Splash tail to go with it. Gee, why did I think? But before you do that, you're gonna have to grow your hair longer.
I am, or get extensions, because Daryl doesn't wear a top in the film, right?
That's right.
Her her whole look was so carefully thought out by your team, down to the fingernail polish, right? Didn't you have?
Thanks. Yes, I developed a design for her fingernail polish. It had that kind of copper tri-layer
Yes.
To it, which I think you only see in one shot, maybe when she's grabbing his wallet underwater or whatever.
It's so iconic. I think anyone who really loves that movie and is those underwater scenes, just watching them over and, you know, the tropical reef of, where are they? Coney Island or?
Oh yeah, the tropical reef in the East River or whatever. It's like, yeah, sure. But you know what was interesting from a conservational standpoint, I don't know what the Bahamas are like now, but in 83 when we were out there, 82, 83, whatever it was, 83, the place was decimated as far as fish go. It was already in really bad shape, and it took the divers forever to find those little groups of fish that are around the coral heads.
Yeah.
Because even at that time, the fish were just the fish population was just decimated.
I know a lot of the coral, like that really beautiful staghorn coral, the yellow.
Yeah.
There are some shots of that in the film. Those are incredibly rare to see.
Yeah. Yeah, all that is rare. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a time capsule, you know, in the best way possible.
Yeah.
One that still holds up, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and speaking of the fact that, you know, Daryl's character didn't wear a top, you know, that was all part and parcel of empowering her, that, you know, she had no modesty. Because of Ron and Brian's insistence on going that route, you know, Disney couldn't figure out a way to release it.
Yep.
You know, because the last film they had made was something like the computer wore tennis shoes with, you know, with Kurt Russell, and that's still where they were at. You know, Absent-Minded Professor Part 3 or whatever, and then suddenly to have a bare-breasted mermaid that is inferred to be sexually active in the film. It was just like, what do we do? It was almost like, how did we greenlight this film? What have we done? Splash led to the creation of Touchstone Studios, so that they had an arm that they could release more adult content. And Splash was such a financial success, it actually saved Disney Studios.
Well, I think there's so much content to cover with your involvement in the Splash project. But in the interest of keeping this video
time,
15 minutes, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. And I think that the mermaid community and tailmakers owe a lot to you as someone who trailblazed this realistic mermaid tale that you can swim in.
So, you know, so again, when I'm working on a project, I always like to bring something new that hasn't been done before, either with materials or a concept or the way it's followed through. And so in the end result, looking back, I'm so, you know, I'm glad that we went that direction with going with basically looking at what do real fish look like, as opposed to what mermaid costumes of the past look like, and basically stepping up the game to create that translucency and putting the pectoral fins on and an actual dorsal fin.
And
so it had more elements to it than previous mermaid costumes it had.
It's exciting because even in this, you know, decade where mermaid tales and tailmakers are, there's so many now, right? It was.
Oh yeah, and they do great work. It's just amazing, from the silicone tails to the printed fabric tails. They're doing just amazing stuff.
So it must feel kind of awesome to feel like you were sort of the, you know,
kind of pioneering
father,
that,
right?
Let's just say just pioneering pioneering kind of sort of that direction, you know. And everybody's brought their own game to the, you know, to the world of making mermaid tales.
Well, thank you again, Robert. This was so awesome, and I'm super excited for everybody to see this video. And
all right, well, so am I, and you know, looking forward to you know, another successful con, even though this one is a little more digital than the last one.
just a little.
Still should be a lot of fun and some great times had by all.
Super excited. And anybody watching this who would like to participate in the con, make sure you go to californiamermaidcon.com and join in on all the rest of the mermaid fun. All right. Bye, Robert.
Bye.